Okay, so welcome back to part 3 of our walkthrough of John O'Callaghan Big Sky remix with Chris Agnelli. So we're going to be taking a look at the bass. You've got what three bass parts there?
Yeah, three. Well, there's a fourth bass part, but it
That's
comes
in the break.
it's just in the
big
break, but it's
sub.
nothing. And having three bass parts is probably quite conservative for me. So the first one is a very standard sort of off, and it's a Vanguard.
Vanguard back in the day.
Back in the day when it was, I think,
It was silent?
Yeah, it was pre-silent, and it was £60, I think. at the
Yeah.
time. And it was lovely. So we have this direct punch.
And a lot of the time, the different notes that you're playing your off bass on can really have an impact on the sort of sound that you use and stuff.
Mhm.
So how do you sort of overcome that? So say if you play a note and F is sounds the nicest and bassiest, but your keys G or C or something like that. Do you just tweak the sound then, and is it about changing the oscillator subs and stuff, or do you just sort of
I would
or is it more EQ that you use?
I would tend to flick through some presets until I get in the area. And here, let me have it. So those three notes actually work. Sometimes you can go down a note and just the whole half falls out of the bass, and it just becomes a. So yeah, what I would do is flick through basses and play around a few notes until I go, right, that bass works in this key and it's solid, and then go in and tweak and start,
And no sort of nothing like EQ'd sidechain compressors or anything to sort of control basses in different regions. I mean, do you like to feel that your bottom end bass is sort of quite stable, or do you mind it sort of the frequency sort of going up and down? Do you want like a wall of bass sub at the bottom, or?
I suppose I would like a wall of bass, but whether I ever achieved that wall of bass, I always wanted, but I would tend to experiment with sounds a lot to make sure that, sometimes it was really frustrating. You would have a bass going on the A note, and it would sound solid and great, and then you go to your chorus and it drops to an E, and you go,
it's just all gone.
It just all goes, and it's the wrong. And then you try going up an octave, and it's like twangy, and so you have to go and change the sound or EQ it, or it all depends on what the sound is doing at the time. You go and listen to it and go, well, can I surgically fix this through EQ or compression, or is it a
sound change?
Sound change, or is it an oscillator? So, we've got
quite a lot of compression on that there.
It's quite, I wanted to I suppose that sound probably was inspired by Star 69, Fatboy Slim.
Right, okay.
The one, what is what, they just strut. And there's an off bass in it, and I remember hearing it in clubs. Just sounded amazing, and was that sort of real twangy,
squarey, sort of bouncies.
Yeah. So kind of heavily compressed, slowish release, fast attack, not that much ratio, and
that compressor will probably help a wee bit with the sort of transitions in key as well.
It'll just squeeze it all down a little bit. Then a high cut on, because I just wanted to sort of. I just wanted a sort of subbiness, and a cut there at 70 dB at 24 octaves.
So you're really looking at your kick being down in the 50s and your bass sort of starting around.
Were you opposite? Were you kick low, bass high?
No, I was kick low as well.
Yeah, to me the kick was the some people were bass low, and the off bass had to be subby and the kick was above.
Yeah,
it.
Paul Van Dyk did a lot of sort of more middle kicks and sort of subbier.
Yeah, so I was always, the kick had to be at the bottom and off bass, just above it. So that, kind of very basic. And let me just see if there's no automation going on in that, because I can just see a bus. See how messy I am. Look, there's a bus saying
random bus.
So, and here you can see it says nothing bass.
So
it's the exact bass from Holding On to Nothing. So
what's this? ES2?
Is an ES2, and it was this thing, Real Fat PK. So don't know. Again, these are probably 5-6 years old. These sounds, maybe
Yeah.
more. Well, if it's holding on to nothing, it's
And is there velocity on the filter and stuff like that?
yeah. There's so let's just quickly go through. It's a couple of saws, slight detuning. This mixer is in the middle. Bit of analog. Cut off blend. So we've so we're a dab of resonance, and we're using the fat sort of filter.
Is it more of an analog richness?
And a bit of distortion. Again, it's probably that saturated, just a slight bit of overdrive. Our subs come from, the sine level.
And is that like just a sub oscillator?
That's a sub oscillator just to turn up, and I think a lot of our width's coming from that unison.
Yeah.
And here we have our router, so we're going through cut off 2 via velocity and send it to envelope 2. So by that becomes kind of Germanic, and that becomes a bit more punchy. The nice click.
And you're modulating that actually in the MIDI clip itself then with the velocities?
Yeah. That's how I like to program if we go and have a look. So you can see there's, these last notes are the twangs. So that was essential to the whole sort of groove of the track.
Yeah.
So once we start... and let's go through then our... So bizarrely, when I put in sine wave, I still do a low cut because there's still sort of sub frequencies there.
Yeah.
So you can hear it's just way too subby, but
so it's like you're sort of adding the sub bass in to create the harmonics.
Yes.
And then you're sort of just removing any of the sort of real low rumbles.
Yeah.
And just sort of fattens the bass.
Yeah, around there, I felt to me, it's got the weight. It just feels like.
And do you think it's better, in general, to maybe err on the side of lightness in the bass, and is it?
I really wouldn't be the person to advise, because I really err on the side of caution with the bass and
how did your stuff sound out? I mean, it must have sounded good in clubs.
No, it didn't. Like El Nino still sounds rubbish. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's still got no bottom end in it, but it has no mighty.
But there was definitely a difference between when you were working on El Nino on the Mackie analog desk, and then you transferred to the Mackie digital desk. With the Avenue kick. There was a general lift, and you added a bit more bass for that whole album and stuff like that.
I think it was the change in speakers. I think it was from it was
Absolute Twos
or something.
Absolute shite.
And then we got the Mackie HR
824s,
and that I could trust them. And the other thing was when we had the Absolute Twos, and when I made El Nino, it was in a living room, quite a sizable living room, but depending where I put my head, it was loads of bass or no bass. I just couldn't.
So you didn't know.
I just couldn't tell what was right and what was wrong. I should have probably listened to more records. And I had a guy working with me at the time, Richard Rainey, who went on to record loads of U2 albums. So he's very experienced, and he helped hone my sort of overall understanding of mixing. Not very well, mind you. But I still, you always had the solidness and the tightness, and it was just bump there, and I didn't. And that was always a big frustration with me.
I thought your stuff's always been very tight. You could hear everything clearly, and all the elements came through really well, and you had the drive. I did find it always lacked a tiny bit of sort of warmth in the bottom end, but I think, maybe if you'd added that, then you wouldn't be getting that punch and drive as much.
I think mix wise, it was always I was always lame, if you know what I mean. It was you had balls, and they had a wow factor, and mine mix wise wasn't particularly good, but it had elements of really nice musicality that overcame those obstacles
or added to. I mean, I think maybe there was your type of mix is added to the music elements of it.
So here we have probably an EQ that nobody ever looks at anymore because it was in Logic 7 before Channel EQ. And what have we got going on here? So let me see. again around 50 hertz.
So you're doing a lot of this boosting and
Yeah.
cutting the same things type.
Yeah, but I think it's not. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's me literally turning a knob until I go, yeah, that sounds nice, and,
Yeah.
and that's it.
You're not thinking, I really must EQ this and then un-EQ it again.
Yeah, I'm not going. I really think at 260 hertz I can hear a peak. No, I can just go. It's about, to me, it's about sound and how
Feeling and a vibe.
Vibe. That's it. It's not. Excuse me, whether there's a hole or not. So there's again high cut going on, and again, another EQ, and that's just lifting. The. Yeah, can you hear that sort of? It's just adding a little bit of clickiness to it, and maybe helping it to cut through a little bit. And there's this element which fifth bass, right?
Yeah.
This helps me give me
Body.
yeah.
Yeah.
With all that changes the whole landscape for me, sound wise, doesn't it? Because it adds it's got this fifth, and we've got a.
It's almost like a low string, or you consider like a cello. If
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely. But that harmonic note, again, there's a compressor sitting open, not doing anything. Right, bad mixing. Auto filter. Yeah, I think we're automating. We're not using that either. So it must have been, again, I think at very early iterations of this track, it might have been using the auto filter.
Yeah,
and
and
then
just decided to solo.
What the auto filter has a tendency to do is, if you open up the cutoff at 100%, you still lose top end information.
Yeah, it doesn't sound the same as.
So if you bypass it, then you get this sort of difference between it being on and off.
Yeah, I remember that at the time was a problem. There wasn't too many filters that were available that, when you transitioned from open to closed, that they sounded the same.
Yeah.
I think the TC Spark high cut filter I always used because it
did that.
was totally natural.
So
yeah.
I think, I probably had that open and ditched it going, well, look, I can hear this transition, and just then used the filters here, which are in parallel. And sorry, I've labelled it as a fifth bass, but it's not. It's actually a seventh. So it's kind of just standard fare again, with your ADSR normal. We've got the filters in series in parallel rather than series, and it's just using the filter to give it, breathe it, move it.
Cool. So to fire it on with a kick there and hear that sort of.
Just a kick, is it, or yeah?
Yeah.
So
it's almost like the sub of the kick gives the bass that weight as well.
Yeah,
then.
it works. It's it's like question and answer. It's it's on off. Yeah, it's.
So
if
you have your kick and your sub too closely in levels, then you don't get, as you say, that on off. You're just getting that boom.
Yeah, absolutely. You get that boom, that sort of boom, and a flab, I call it. Everyone becomes flabby, and I suppose it was.
Again, it's that good dynamics thing. Changes and
One thing I want to point out. What can change everything for me is even the length of the note, the off bass note. So if let's just for listening purposes turn that up. So I've shortened it there and becomes just bouncy.
Yeah. And that goes solid.
And then we
flabby.
So that's.
And again, that's something you spend time on. You probably go back to a few times, just sort of getting that right.
Yeah. So that is, it's not a 16th. It is not. It's it's halfway between a 16th, just coming off just before the kick comes in. So it's not flabby. If it's too short, it becomes that sort of bouncy.
Yeah.
And that's, if you're doing off bases, literally, guys, work at the length of a note because it can change the feel.
I haven't heard a lot of recent trance. Is that sort of died out a bit, the off bass, or is there still? I
think it just depends. If it's, you probably in this track, if I return that to its original mix position, which is probably down here, you don't.
the feeling.
It's a feeling thing. It's not massively in your face. It's just sitting, bubbling underneath. I'm probably all about that little intricacies and things.
Yeah, a lot of. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff we're listening to. And there's subtle EQs, there's subtle compression. And the sort of like that fifth bass underneath. It's not something you're instantly going to hear in a mix. Go wow, but it all adds up to an overall feeling of.
It's just like that layer of a cake. There's those sort of layer of foods or something. It's just those little subtleties you put in that change the landscape.
And how do you come up with those things when you're thinking about a track? Obviously for beginners that are sort of, they're maybe starting out and they wouldn't necessarily know. They're maybe more focused on the main elements and things like that. So how did that come about for you, and when did you start thinking about, was it listening to other tracks, or is it just a pure feeling thing? You just sort of a gut instinct of.
I genuinely think with me it's a gut instinct. I don't ever plan to, that would sound lovely with a fifth bass in there or a seventh, thing, or I play about with sounds and go, cool, that sounds awesome, and you work it in, and then it's another synth. And what I have a tendency to do is, work for a week, and I build for a day a track up with all the sound elements, leave it, come in the morning, and usually rip it all back out again, strip it back and go, and be really critical and go, right, that element doesn't work, that pad doesn't work, that synth stab's not working out, and then so on a Monday I'll build it up, Tuesday strip it down, build it up again, Wednesday strip it down, build it up again,
and each time you're maybe leaving in the components that are really working,
and then by Friday I even sometimes pull all the faders and just start the mix again and just start bringing elements in and seeing what working and going, right, we've got a vibe here. And that's it's not, I've never ever planned it.
Do you again, from the beginner's perspective, they might not realize that what they're looking for is these magical moments or magical, it always happened to me, if you worked on a track long enough and you did that, as you say, you sort of strip it back and add things, there'll be elements or times when you go, those two works, and that can change the entire direction of a track. So you maybe then start base your track around maybe that, as you say, the fifth bass and the other bass working together, and that really works. And do you think that's just being in the right place at the right time and just keep trying stuff and keep building and building and destroying? I suppose it's like
when I interviewed Jupiter Race Gregory Ferguson the other day, and I asked him what would your one piece of advice for you guys coming through. He says, trust your heart, trust your instinct, and that you learn. It's an instincts. You start to learn instincts, like sort of anything. Do it loads of times, fail loads of times, but then have a takeaway.
And I would say the opposite of that is listening to too many other tracks. I think that can sway you, because then you start second guessing yourself about, it doesn't sound like this track, even though your instinct's saying it sounds cool.
Yeah.
Then you get into this limbo land of, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, So would you advise just, go with your gut, and it'll come together eventually, even if it's not sounding right now, sort of thing?
I think one thing I can say with absolute confidence about Agnelli and Nelson and all our productions was they were very different. They never sounded like anybody else, and that was purely because I was rubbish at trying to copy people, so I just had to do my own thing, and I always was looking for the different riff, the standout sort of, like, if I think back to Hudson Street, the riff in it's just totally bizarre, but it worked. And
I remember you being quite firm with like Alex Gold, who was your label manager in the time, and different people who were going, it's not really trance, and you're going, look, it's good, it's cool, I like it,
Yeah, trust me, and then I suppose what you're vindicated when people come up and go, there's nothing like that. In fact, a couple of DJs said, I can't remember, I think it was Hudson Street or something, said it's really hard to play because there's no other records like it to play after or around it.
Yeah,
and that's kind of like, well, that's good. So yeah, I was rubbish at trying to copy people, and I wasn't very good at breaking tracks down and understanding what they did. I just had this instinct and this sort of gut feeling, and I worked at stuff, Phil. It's not. I worked and sat and trimmed those bass lines for half a day until I found the right way it was working. It's not just. It's not very easy for me to do music, and it was always quite long. And I get frustrated when I hear people, I can do a track in a day, because it takes me 3 weeks, to do a track and to find that elusive vibe.
And that's 3 solid weeks.
Yeah, nine hours a day.
9 hours or 10 hours in the studio, yeah.
Absolutely. And just tweaking, and you've seen me tweaking hi-hats for, half a day, and just the level of detail. And I think, especially today in 2012, I think production techniques have become, I don't know what's happened in the last sort of 24 months. Production techniques have just gone through the roof, or production values. And I think you just have to be that much better than everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, the quality of the stuff that's coming out now is just ridiculous. That sort of Knife Party, Skrillex, and just even the guys that are in that same genre that are just coming through, some of the Madeon stuff, like Madeon's production is just
like
ridiculous.
20 odd, and that's, 20 odd, we were barely switching on computers, but that's, again, I think the other thing, the element, myself and you are from Belfast, which is kind of like a backwater in the UK. So we also felt we had to double our efforts to prove ourselves on a world stage. It was like, I felt like that. I felt a bit sort of, well, I'm not in the London scene, so I have to be twice as good as the London guys. And you kind of went over and worked with a few of the London guys and found out they actually weren't that good. We'd worked so hard at it. We kind of had a much better understanding, and we're much better at it. So yeah,
cool. Well, that's the drums or the bass wrapped up. In the next part, we'll look at pads and strings and the sort of different sort of atmospheric stuff.
Absolutely.